The Flintstones 1994, the Flintstones movie, live-action Flintstones, whatever you want to call it. It's a very divisive film. Some consider it a beloved childhood classic, while others consider it another member of that good old cartoons getting adapted into lackluster live-action films club. But regardless of how you feel about the film, I'm willing to bet that you don't know the interesting story behind it. How did it come to be? Why were these actors selected? And why did they decide to make the film in the way that they did? Well, get ready because I'm gonna answer all and more of those questions right now. This is the complete history of the Flintstones 1994. So, the Flintstones 1994 obviously started production in 1985. Amblin Entertainment, Steven Spielberg's production company, had expressed interest in making a live-action Flintstones film, so Spielberg sent two guys on the case, Keith Barish and Joel Silver. It was up to them to acquire the rights, and lo and behold, they did. But acquiring the rights for the Flintstones was the easy part. The hard part was everything else. Nobody really had a plan for what they wanted the Flintstones movie to be. So as a result, they commissioned other people to come up with the story instead. Their first pick was Stephen E. D'Souza. He wrote a script, and it was rejected. Then Daniel and Joshua Golden wrote a script, and that too was thrown out. All in all, they went through 5 different scripts before they finally found one that they liked. And getting that script was a journey in and of itself. Because of the steady flow of lackluster scripts, Amblin decided to clean house and start all over. They got world's biggest Flintstone fan Brian Levant to direct, and Tom S. Parker and Jim Genuine to write the script. The script in question was a big hit, and Amblin decided to use that one for the final product. Kind of. You see, they liked the basis of the script, but they didn't really like the mechanics. According to Amblin, it was compelling and it matched the show, but it just wasn't funny enough yet. So they hired 8 sitcom writers to help make it pop, and then they hired 3 more, and then 5 more, and then eventually there were 33 writers. And I'm not saying that there were 33 writers in total, I'm saying that there were 33 writers all at once. Every single one of them would gather in an office and then pitch all these different jokes and gags and storylines to add. In fact, one of the writers, Dana Savell, said that it was a madhouse, and she doesn't think that she has a single line in the entire film. Naturally, this work environment was rather chaotic, and some, like myself, theorized that this is why the final film feels so cluttered. If you've seen the film, then you know that there's a lot going on. There's the adoption plotline, the embezzlement story, the Rubbles' financial situation, Fred versus his mother-in-law, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But that's purely speculation, so moving on to the straight facts. The Flintstones having this many writers didn't just create a problem when it came to a writing environment, it also brought up the question, who's gonna get credit? For some reason, rules dictated that only 3 writers were allowed to get credit. There was a lot of infighting and bickering and protesting, but eventually, nobody got their way. Only Parker, Genuine, and D'Souza got credit. Huh, that's life, I guess. Now that the script was done, it was on to produce the movie. Universal had just bought the rights from New Line Cinema, and that changed next to nothing.
Oh dear God, it's exactly the same.
But it is worth mentioning as it was technically a major event. Right from the beginning, Steven Spielberg knew that he wanted John Goodman to play Fred Flintstone, and in fact, he was so sold on this idea that if John Goodman said no, the film would have shut down. Goodman was not very excited to play the role, and in fact, he would go on to say that at the time, the only reason he did it is because of pressure. When Goodman was doing a table read for the film Always, Spielberg announced to the crew, "Ladies and gentlemen, I found my Fred Flintstone." And from there, Goodman was officially attached to the project, whether he liked it or not. Despite this, John Candy, John Belushi, and Chevy Chase were also considered for the role. Belushi and Chase were turned down because they would have to wear a fat suit, and the crew didn't think that they could really make it look convincing. And we're not sure why John Candy wasn't considered, but I think it's because they really just wanted Goodman. Rick Moranis and Danny DeVito were considered for Barney Rubble, before Moranis eventually edging him out because he had that optimistic and fun-filled flair. Meanwhile, DeVito came across as too rough and gruff. So many actresses wanted to play Wilma Flintstone, but really, it was always going to be Elizabeth Perkins. Perkins really wanted the role. She even did her hair like Wilma's when she came into the audition. And much like John Goodman, Rosie O'Donnell was considered the only choice for Betty Rubble. This is because Levant was a big fan of her and knew that she too was a big Flintstones fan. And when she came in to read for the part, she not only had a stellar impression of the character's signature giggle, but she also treated the crew to an impromptu 10-minute stand-up routine, and right then, they knew they had their Betty. O'Donnell would also prove to be an asset on the set. She would point out little things that they could add to tie into the show, like the Bedrock Twitch. The only reason that song is in there is because she brought it up to Levant. According to her, no Flintstones film would be complete without the Bedrock Twitch. With the cast now firmly in place, it was on to production. Industrial Light and Magic would handle the CG elements, and the Creature Shop would handle the visual effects. Most notably the creatures like Dino's puppet or the Pegasaurus. The costumes were rather difficult to figure out. What the costume designers quickly realized was that, yeah, the character's attire would look fine in animation, but it just doesn't translate well to live action. So some liberties had to be taken, like Fred's tie being a snakeskin instead of solid blue, or the shades or proportions being changed. But no matter what was altered, there had to be at least some precedence from the original show, or the subsequent merchandise. Many of the ideas for costumes were taken from bits of Flintstones memorabilia that Levant had in his giant collection. Things were going just fine until it came time to film the quarry scenes. See, the set for the quarry was built in the LA Dam. When they were scouting the location and building the sets, it was as dry as a bone. However, when it came time to shoot the scenes, it was flooded. That's why there's a bunch of water in the background in all the quarry scenes. Rather than pay a whole bunch of money to drain it because, that's not really possible, the crew decided to film around it and let it be part of the world. But that wasn't the only problem that the LA Dam brought. It was also unbelievably hot. Unintentional rhyme. Not only was the heat intense on its own, but nobody was wearing shoes, so everybody's feet got cut and or burnt. But for what it's worth, the crew treated the cast really well. Firstly, their injuries were properly treated, but they were also given good catering food, there were games set up in between shots, and everybody was treated with respect. Heck, even the puppet for the Dictabird got its own stylist. Partly because they were treated so well, and partly because they were having a lot of fun, the cast was really happy on set, especially two people. Rick Moranis and, surprisingly, John Goodman. The two of them hit it off, and they were inseparable throughout the entire shoot. Their little duo developed the nickname The Boys after Laurel and Hardy. Also of note is that Elizabeth Taylor, who played Wilma's mother, was also having a great time because this has been the first time in ages since she was in a feature-length film. This would also prove to be her last. Even so, she didn't know that at the time, and to her, this was considered a major comeback. However, despite all this positivity, Brian Levant did have one dark spot in production. It was that he was getting kind of upset over having to breeze past all these scenes. He wanted each one to be a little bit longer so that they could dwell more on the characters and the environment, but by the time that he realized this, it was already too late. He had to carry on as planned. Also, this was an open set. Anybody could come visit Bedrock or the Quarry or wherever else they shot and take a look at the action. As long as they weren't in frame, the visitors were always welcome. Levant even says that performing in front of them was sometimes like dinner theater. As soon as the cameras stopped rolling, they would get a big round of applause. And I'm sure this helped the cast feel even better about what they were doing and helped them give it that much more effort. The film debuted in May of 1994, and despite having some high critical praise from Prince Charles of all people, it received some very negative reviews. Most notably from Siskel and Ebert, who said that despite this being a family-friendly film, kids wouldn't be able to follow all these complex themes like embezzlement and corporate greed. And many other critics also noted that they didn't feel that the script was as strong as it could have been considering the actors involved. Speaking of the actors, O'Donnell and Perkins' performance were widely hated. But as expected, they all considered John Goodman ideal casting. The film was still able to turn a profit though, but no sequel was made for a very long time. Levant was really unhappy with this, as even on the DVD commentary, you can hear just how passionate he is about doing this film again. Keep in mind, The Flintstones is his favorite show of all time. So much so that he keeps a personal Flintstones museum in his house. Eventually, his pleas were answered, and he was allowed to produce The Flintstones in Viva Rock Vegas. But that disaster is a story for another day. So that's the story of The Flintstones 1994. It really was a big-budget fan film. So many hardcore Flintstones fans were pulling the strings, and honestly, it kinda shows. The level of passion and excitement just radiates off the screen. But at the same time, yeah, its script is a little, cluttered and probably a bit too complex. But hey, I think we can all agree that it's miles better than what came later. Ew! Well, folks, thanks for watching the video. What'd you guys think? What did you learn from this video, and what stories did you know before? And also, what do you think of the film itself? Are you in the camp that considers it a great film, albeit maybe a little flawed? Or do you consider it just another one of those bad cartoon adaptations? Personally, while I do admit that the film has some serious flaws, I'm in the former group. It's just so charming, I can't help but like it. But anyways, this isn't about me, this is about you. Comment below and let me know, because I'm always excited to hear what you guys have to say. And now, before we get to our Patreon stuff, it's time for another fan art shoutout. Today's submission comes courtesy of Captain Something. Bizarre media, am I right, he says? And yeah, most certainly. I love this art style here and the dynamic pose, definitely a JoJo reference, I'm sure. And I'm loving how all the fan art is now incorporating my love for VHS tapes into it all. It really makes me smile. Really dynamic and really exciting to look at. I love it. And now it's time to thank our wonderful Patreon people, starting with our Masters of Fate, Chan 11, Diego V, Kev Messick, Manny Paredes, MD the Dude, Ryan Williams, Timey, and Woody Woo. And now our executive producers, Aaron Vasquez, Albert Robinson, Blackjack, Edward Haas, HR Hoffman, I Am Vove, Indiscreet One, Ravioli Supremo, Unkale, Who Else But Zane, and YouTube Milkwad. If you too would like your name read at the end of every Media Mementos video, then why not donate to the Patreon? There's a link in the description below for you to check out. And there's also a link to the Media Mementos Discord server, so why not pop in and say hi? Alright folks, thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you guys next time.